March 6, 1944. 18,000 feet above the snow-choked forests west of Vitebsk, Byelorussia. The cockpit smells of oil, cold metal, and fear. Frost creeps along the canopy of Captain Aleksei Morozov's Yak-9 as his breath fogs the glass. Below him, the front is a scar, blackened trees, artillery flashes, a battlefield grinding east and west like a giant's jaws. In his headset, the voice of his regimental commander is clipped, rehearsed, familiar. Pair turn left, climb, maintain formation. Morozov obeys without hesitation. He has done this maneuver 1,000 times, over training fields near Ryazan, over frozen lakes, over chalkboards filled with rigid arrows and fixed engagement boxes. The enemy is always expected to behave correctly, approach from known directions, commit to turning fights, obey physics as written in the doctrine. The doctrine itself is a product of survival. The Red Air Force has been rebuilt after catastrophe. In 1941, it was nearly annihilated on the ground. Since then, training has become centralized, simplified, and brutally standardized. Pilots are taught what to do, not why. Initiative is dangerous. Creativity is suspicious. Deviating from orders can mean a court-martial, or worse. Morozov remembers his instructor's words clearly. You do not win by thinking alone. You win by following the plan. The plan assumes coordination from above, strict control from ground stations, and massed force. It works against predictable enemies in predictable conditions. But American tactics, quietly filtering into the war through Lend-Lease aircraft and whispered intelligence reports, are built on a different philosophy. American pilots are trained to decide, not just obey. In distant skies over England and the Pacific, U.S. airmen are drilled to fight as individuals within a team. They are encouraged to break formation if the situation demands it, to exploit altitude, speed, and surprise, even if it means briefly disobeying expectations. Their training emphasizes situational awareness, flexible responses, and rapid adaptation. The Soviet system has no room for this. Back over Vitebsk, Morozov rolls hard right, trying to stay with his wingman. His training screams at him to maintain position. The radio crackles with conflicting orders: climb, descend, regroup. The ground controller is seconds behind reality, his instructions already outdated by the time they reach the cockpit. Another slashing pass, another yak gone. Morozov realizes something terrifying in that moment. The enemy, or the tactic, always seems one move ahead. Not because they are braver, not because their aircraft is superior, but because they are allowed to think in the air. As he limps back towards friendly lines, ammunition nearly spent, Morozov understands that no amount of bravery can compensate for rigidity. The sky does not reward obedience, it rewards adaptation. And the Red Air Force, for all its numbers and courage, is beginning to encounter an invisible opponent, one not defined by nationality, but by training philosophy. A philosophy that Red Air Force doctrine was never designed to face. The debriefing room smells of damp wool and cigarette smoke. A portrait of Comrade Stalin stares down from the wall, unblinking. Morozov sits straight-backed on a wooden bench as the regimental commander, Colonel Ivan Petrov, unrolls a map across the table. The formation failed to hold cohesion, Petrov says flatly. His finger taps the map where 3 red stars have been crossed out. You allowed separation. Morozov opens his mouth, then closes it. He wants to say the attack came from above and behind, that the enemy refused to turn, that they struck once and vanished. He wants to say the rules did not fit the sky he fought in, but the rules are sacred. To maintain formation is to maintain control. Control is victory. The lesson is clear. The problem was not the doctrine. The problem was the pilot. This is how the Soviet training system protects itself from reality. The Red Air Force of 1944 is vast, disciplined, and lethal, but it is also trapped inside a hierarchy forged by fear. Every training syllabus, every flight pattern, every combat maneuver has been approved by layers of command. Deviating from them requires permission. Permission takes time. Time is what aerial combat never gives. Soviet pilots are trained to fight by script. Engagements are broken into phases: detection, approach, attack, disengagement. Each phase has approved actions. The enemy is assumed to behave rationally, predictably, and, most importantly, symmetrically. Dogfights are expected to become turning battles, where courage and numbers decide the outcome. American tactics reject this assumption entirely. U.S. training emphasizes energy fighting, the use of altitude and speed as interchangeable currencies. Pilots are taught that survival and victory come from refusing fair fights. If you have altitude, you dive and strike. If you lack it, you disengage. Turning is a last resort, not a goal. This mindset terrifies Soviet commanders. A pilot who breaks off an engagement might be seen as cowardly. A pilot who abandons formation might be accused of recklessness. The system does not reward survival, it rewards compliance. And so the gap widens. By late 1944, American advisors quietly observe Soviet units flying Lend-Lease aircraft, P-39s, P-63s, and later P-47s, using them as if they were upgraded yaks. The planes are capable of high-speed dives, zoom climbs, and hit-and-run attacks. But Soviet training rarely exploits these strengths. Instead, pilots are ordered to fly them in tight formations at medium altitude, exactly as doctrine dictates. One American advisor, Major Robert Hastings, writes in his private notes after observing a joint exercise, "They fly brave, they fly disciplined, but they fly like the sky is a parade ground." No one in the Soviet chain of command ever reads this. Morozov experiences the cost of this rigidity firsthand weeks later. Over East Prussia, his unit encounters German F-190s, employing tactics increasingly similar to American methods: fast passes, vertical separation, coordinated but independent action. Again, the ground controller issues instructions based on outdated positions. Again, the formation hesitates, waiting for orders instead of reacting. Again, aircraft are lost. After landing, Morozov notices something new among the younger pilots. Not fear, anger. They whisper in corners, comparing notes, quietly admitting that what they are told to do no longer matches what keeps them alive. But whispers do not change doctrine. Only catastrophe does. And it is coming. As the war pushes westward and Soviet forces encounter increasingly complex air battles, the limitations of centralized control become impossible to ignore. The Americans are not present in large numbers over the Eastern Front, but their ideas are, and those ideas are spreading like contraband. The Red Air Force is winning the war on the ground. In the air, however, it is learning a painful truth. A system that cannot bend will always break when it meets a more flexible enemy. January 14, 1945. 22,000 feet above the Vistula River, Poland. Captain Aleksei Morozov climbs alone. He should not be here by himself. The flight plan calls for a 4-ship escort, rigid spacing, altitude locked. But flak had scattered the formation, and in the chaos, Morozov did something unthinkable. He chose. Below him, German bombers, Ju-88s, push east, aiming for Soviet bridgeheads. Morozov has altitude, speed, and a fleeting window. He could wait, regroup, call it in. Or he could dive. Training screams no, but experience, bloody, expensive experience, says now. Morozov rolls inverted and drops. The Yak-9 howls as gravity stacks speed onto speed. The airframe shudders. The bomber grows rapidly in his gun sight, its dorsal gunner swinging too late. Morozov fires a short burst. Cannon rounds tear through the wing root. The Ju-88 lurches, then folds in on itself, disappearing into cloud. Morozov pulls up hard, black spots dancing in his vision. He has just done something American pilots are trained to do from their first weeks in flight school. He has just done something that will get him reprimanded. Back on the ground, Morozov reports the kill. The room goes quiet. Colonel Petrov's eyes narrow, not with pride, but suspicion. You were separated from your formation. Yes, Comrade Colonel. You engaged without authorization. Yes. Silence stretches. Finally, Petrov speaks. Your actions, while successful, endangered the mission. Morozov realizes the truth in that moment. In this system, results matter less than obedience. The kill is logged. No medal is mentioned. The lesson is unmistakable. This is the heart of why Soviet training struggles against American-style tactics. The Red Air Force does not lack courage, skill, or capable aircraft. It lacks permission. American pilots are conditioned to believe that initiative is not just allowed, it is expected. After-action reports analyze decisions, not just outcomes. A pilot who disengages to fight another day is not shamed, he is evaluated. In contrast, Soviet training treats deviation as a threat to control. A pilot who thinks independently introduces unpredictability into a system designed to eliminate it. Yet air combat is nothing but unpredictability. By 1945, the irony is bitter. The Red Army is on the doorstep of Berlin, unstoppable on land. But in the air, German pilots increasingly adopt decentralized tactics learned from years of fighting Americans and British in the West. Soviet pilots face enemies who no longer play by the old rules. Morozov notices it in the skies over Pomerania. Enemy fighters refuse turning battles. They climb away when threatened. They attack only when conditions favor them. The Soviet response remains the same. Tighter formations, more radio control, stricter discipline. Losses continue. Not catastrophic, but unnecessary. After one particularly costly mission, a young lieutenant slams his helmet onto a bench. Why do they always know where we'll be? He demands. Morozov doesn't answer. He already knows. Because the enemy is trained to adapt, and they are trained to assume you will not. The tragedy is not that Soviet pilots fail to learn. It is that the system refuses to let their learning matter. As the war nears its end, small changes begin to surface, unofficial, unapproved. Wingmen fly looser. Leaders delay radio calls, trusting their eyes instead. Initiative creeps back into the cockpit, quietly, dangerously. But it is too late for the war, and far too late to change the system that punished the very instincts that could have saved lives. April 25th, 1945. 15,000 feet above the Elbe River, Germany. The sky is crowded now. Soviet fighters stream west. American aircraft move east. For the first time, Morozov sees them clearly, not as distant rumors or half-understood tactics, but as allies sharing the same airspace. A pair of P-51 Mustangs slide past his yak, polished aluminum flashing in the sun. They do not fly in rigid blocks. Their spacing breathes. One sits high, watching. The other ranges wide, scanning. No one tells them where to look. They already know. Morozov watches, fascinated. Then the radios crackle, confusion, overlapping commands. Soviet ground control struggles to manage the congestion. The Americans, by contrast, seem almost silent. Their movements are subtle, fluid, like predators sharing territory without colliding. A lone Bf-109 appears, darting in low, trying to escape west. Instinctively, Morozov turns to pursue. Before he can fire, one Mustang drops from above in a steep dive, a single burst snapping the German fighter apart. The American pulls up and is gone, rejoining his wingman without comment. No approval, no delay, no hesitation, just execution. The war ends weeks later. Medals are awarded, banners are raised. The Red Air Force is declared victorious, and it is. On paper, the doctrine worked. The enemy is destroyed. The cost, however, is quietly buried beneath statistics. Morozov survives the war with 5 confirmed kills. He should feel pride. Instead, he feels unease. In the post-war evaluations, training manuals are updated, but only slightly. The emphasis remains on centralized control, massed formations, and strict adherence to command. The war's outcome reinforces old beliefs rather than challenging them. Victory becomes proof that change is unnecessary. American reports, meanwhile, dissect every engagement. Pilots' decisions are debated openly. Failures are mined for lessons. Success is never assumed to be permanent. 2 air forces emerge from the same war, having learned very different things. Morozov is assigned to help train new pilots in 1946. He stands before a classroom, chalk in hand, diagrams waiting on the board. Young faces stare back at him, eager, untested. He hesitates. For a moment, he considers telling them the truth, that survival sometimes means breaking formation, that the sky is not a parade ground, that thinking can save your life. Then he sees the political officer at the back of the room. Morozov draws the standard formation. Control, he says carefully, is everything. The lie tastes bitter. This is why Soviet training failed against American tactics, not because it was weak, but because it was rigid. It produced brave pilots who were denied the freedom to adapt, and punished those who learned too quickly. American tactics did not win because of superior machines alone. They won because the system trusted individuals to make decisions when the plan collapsed, which it always does in combat. The tragedy is not that the Soviets lost the air war. They did not. The tragedy is that they won without understanding why they survived, and why next time survival might not be enough. Morozov leaves the airfield one evening, watching contrails fade into the darkening sky. Somewhere beyond them, a new conflict is already forming, shaped by the lessons learned and the lessons ignored. The sky remembers everything.